I'll let you in on a secret. Don't tell anybody I said this, but we figured out how to just see so much money out of Hollywood and the internet. Like, we're just running with it.
I know it, dude.
Until the f***ing wheels fall off.
He built an empire on swagger and watched it unravel live, one click at a time. FaZe Banks wasn't just a gamer. He was the guy who made gaming look like a lifestyle worth chasing. Mansions, friendships that felt like brotherhood, and money that seemed to print itself. To millions, he wasn't selling products. He was selling permission to dream. But gravity doesn't care about charisma. A single coin, a single stream, a single trust me, and the floor gave way. What started as hype turned into a freefall, and the internet did what it always does. Rewound the tape and pressed play on every forgotten receipt. Old wounds reopened. CSGO gambling whispers became megaphones. Save the Kids wasn't just a headline, it was a pattern. Then came MLGcoin, the stream with Aiden, and the losses that hit in real time while the chat howled. The timing was poetic. The backlash was instant. Banks pushed back. Never scammed. Narratives. Mental drained. The posts came fast. The doubts came faster. If this was just bad luck, why did it look so familiar? Why did the same story keep wearing new clothes? Because the truth about internet legends is simple. The gift that builds them is the same thing that can break them. Charm sells, hype moves. But when the receipts surface, the SHT gets real quiet. This isn't a takedown. It's a timeline. How a master of momentum turned controversy into currency, and how the bill finally came due. We'll follow the moves, the coins, the DMs, and the deals. Then ask the only question that matters. If the dream was real, why does the ending feel scripted? Keep watching. The illusion starts where the cheering stops. Before FaZe Banks became the poster boy for internet controversy, he was something else entirely. The dream made real. To every kid growing up watching trickshot montages and energy drink ads, Banks was the proof that playing video games with your friends could make you rich, famous, and unstoppable. In the early 2010s, FaZe Clan wasn't a business. It was a brotherhood. Just a group of guys pulling off impossible shots in Call of Duty, hyping each other up, and uploading videos from their bedrooms. And at the center of it all stood Banks. Not the best gamer, but easily the best storyteller. He understood something most didn't. People didn't just want to watch success. They wanted to feel like they were part of it. That was Banks's real power. He wasn't building FaZe through skill. He was building it through image. The parties, the Hollywood collabs, the confident rants on camera. Every piece of content sold the fantasy that anyone could be next. That you didn't need a degree, a plan, or even luck. Just a dream, a controller, and a bit of audacity. Fans didn't just follow him, they lived through him. And in that sense, Banks wasn't lying. He did create something bigger than himself. He turned gaming into culture. FaZe became a brand name, a lifestyle, a ticket out of mediocrity for a whole generation. But here's the thing about illusions. They only work when the audience never looks behind the curtain. Because behind the laughter, the vlogs, and the fame was a man who had learned that hype could buy anything, even when the money wasn't real yet. And that lesson, the idea that you could fake it till you make it, would be the same mindset that built his empire, and later tore it down. But before the fall came the first play, a gamble so bold, it would define everything that came after. Every empire has its origin story. For Banks, it wasn't forged in boardrooms or contracts. It started in the shadows of a digital casino. By 2016, FaZe Clan was everywhere. Millions of subscribers, sponsorships, global recognition. But fame doesn't always mean profit. Behind the scenes, the group was bleeding cash, trying to keep up with their own image. Big houses, flashy cars, expensive tournaments. It all looked effortless, but the numbers didn't add up. That's when Banks saw an opportunity, or rather, a loophole. He and a few partners launched CSGO Wild, a gambling site dressed up as a harmless game of chance. Players could bet their in-game weapon skins, digital collectibles worth real money, for a shot at winning more. On the surface, it felt like entertainment. Behind the scenes, it was a money printer. Banks later bragged about pulling in nearly $200,000 a day. But the darker truth? The site was rigged, the players were mostly underage, and the people promoting it, including FaZe members, were the same people secretly running it. They claimed innocence, pretending they had no ownership in the site. But when the paper trail surfaced, the story crumbled. FaZe wasn't just a gaming brand anymore. It was a business built on deception, disguised as innovation. And while fans felt betrayed, Banks called it a hustle. He admitted he ran it to fund FaZe's esports ambitions, to finesse their way into buying a pro team they couldn't afford. In his mind, it wasn't fraud. It was creative survival. But this was the first time the public saw behind the curtain. The first glimpse that the charm had a price. CSGO Wild shut down. The money vanished. The reputation took a hit. But instead of learning from the scandal, Banks learned how to bury one. He moved on fast, louder and bolder than before, and the internet, hungry for entertainment, followed him right back. Because Banks understood something dangerous. On the internet, people don't stay mad forever. They just wait for the next distraction. But he wasn't done gambling yet. He had only upgraded the table, and next time, he wouldn't be playing for skins. He'd be playing for millions. If the CSGO scandal was the warning sign, Banks ignored it completely. Because for him, it worked. The outrage faded, the views climbed, and the name FaZe Banks became bigger than ever. He'd survived his first real controversy, and that survival gave him something far more intoxicating than money: invincibility. FaZe Clan exploded into a global empire. No longer just a gaming team, it was a full-blown movement. Fashion, music, parties, sponsorships. Every influencer wanted in. Every brand wanted a piece. Banks wasn't just a gamer anymore. He was a brand architect. The streetwear drops sold out in minutes. Esports deals hit 7 figures. And the houses, the FaZe mansions, became internet landmarks. And at the center of it all was Banks, the cool-headed ringleader who somehow made chaos look like leadership. Cameras loved him. Fans worshipped him. He spoke in the language of authenticity. Wild confidence. No filters. Pure, real talk. I came out here alone. I didn't have the FaZe guys. I didn't have anyone. I did it by myself. That quote wasn't just a moment. It was his mantra. It fed the story that he was self-made, unstoppable, and untouchable. And that illusion fueled the entire FaZe mythos. But behind the scenes, the empire was running on risk. Banks wasn't building slow, sustainable success. He was building hype, stacking it like dominoes, hoping none of them would fall. Every deal, every partnership, every new coin flip was another gamble disguised as genius. Still, people believed, because Banks didn't just sell success, he embodied it. He was the guy every viewer thought they could be. Loud, confident, unbothered, always winning. The perfect illusion of a man who could outsmart any system. But the higher you climb, the thinner the air gets, and the more you start believing your own story. And Banks was already writing his next chapter, a comeback that would make him richer, riskier, and ultimately, his own downfall. By the time crypto took over the internet, FaZe Banks was perfectly positioned to exploit it. The language of digital money, fast gains, secret projects, insider culture was just a louder, shinier version of what he'd always sold. Hype that looked like opportunity. When the blockchain gold rush began, everyone wanted to be early. Influencers were turning tokens into fortunes overnight. To Banks, it wasn't a new game, just a new arena. The same rules applied. Build buzz, sell the dream, disappear before it burns. First came the Save the Kids token, a so-called charity crypto project promoted by several FaZe members, meant to help children while investors profited. The coin tanked almost instantly, leaving fans broke and furious. FaZe Rain, Tycho, and Jarvis faced backlash, suspensions, and investigations. Banks, meanwhile, stayed silent, distancing himself publicly while privately navigating the same circles that built those schemes. Then came more names: Bushel, Hawk Tourcoin, and other half-baked projects that promised a revolution and delivered nothing. Each coin followed the same pattern: hyped launches, influencer tweets, massive spikes, then total collapse. Every time, the story was the same. Banks wasn't involved, or it was out of his control. But the results didn't lie. Millions lost, trust eroded, and Banks's reputation, already scarred, became a roadmap of how to cash in without accountability. Still, the timing couldn't have been better for him. The world was distracted by meme coins and overnight millionaires. People didn't want to hear about scams. They wanted to believe they could get lucky next. And Banks, ever the salesman, played right into that fantasy. He presented himself as a crypto veteran, someone who knew the game, someone who could turn followers into investors with one nod of approval. His tweets carried weight. His endorsements moved markets, or at least they appeared to. But under all the confidence was the same pattern that had followed him for years: build, hype, deny, repeat. Every new coin was another roll of the dice. Every controversy was just another headline to outrun. And when the MLGcoin appeared, a nostalgic nod to the golden age of gaming, Banks saw more than a meme. He saw his comeback, a way to merge his legacy with the newest wave of digital greed. But this time, he wasn't just risking his own image. He was dragging one of the biggest streamers on the planet down with him. The night Aiden Ross went live with FaZe Banks was supposed to be entertainment, a mix of crypto talk, banter, and a promise of generational wealth. What it became instead was a masterclass in how fast hype can implode when the money is real and the losses are public. Banks walked into that stream as the confident mentor, the veteran investor who'd seen it all. Surrounded by his crew, he talked about strategy, market cycles, and the next big opportunity: MLGcoin, a nostalgic token that borrowed its name from the old Major League Gaming brand. The pitch was simple: culture, history, upside. The kind of vague but emotionally charged language that sells belief before logic ever catches up. Aiden bought in, literally. Right there on stream, he threw $50,000 into MLG while thousands watched. For a brief moment, the chat exploded with excitement. Then, the numbers started falling. Within minutes, Aiden's portfolio was bleeding. $7,000 gone, then $12,000, then more. The excitement turned to panic, the laughter to disbelief. Viewers watched in real time as the hype coin tanked. But Banks didn't flinch. He smirked, calmed the room, and spun the loss into a lesson. Don't look at it. Don't stare at the chart. This is long term. It was the same tone he'd used for years, part reassurance, part control. Even when the numbers said disaster, Banks sold confidence. Behind the charm, though, the truth was harsh. The MLG coin wasn't backed by technology, partnerships, or a real roadmap. It was built on nostalgia and faith, two things that collapse. The second doubt enters the room, and that night, doubt was the only thing left standing. Fans called it manipulation, critics called it a scam, but Banks called it bad timing. When Aiden's $50,000 turned into a public loss, Banks defended himself with the same playbook he always used: deny intent, blame circumstances, and move on before the dust settles. What he didn't realize was that this time, the internet wasn't going to move on. Because Aiden wasn't just another fan. He was a friend, a fellow influencer, and one of the biggest streamers in the world. The betrayal wasn't abstract. It was personal. And when money and trust collide in front of millions, the fallout doesn't fade. It multiplies. The next morning, screenshots started circulating. DMs, tweets, allegations. And suddenly, Banks wasn't the teacher anymore. He was the target. The internet never sleeps, and it never forgets. Within days of that disastrous stream, the story turned from Aiden lost some money to FaZe Banks scammed his friend live. It didn't matter what Banks said next. The receipts were already spreading. Private messages leaked, screenshots of Banks venting in group chats, blaming Aiden for the collapse of MLGcoin. In his words, Aiden Ross effed this up. His ego got hurt. He spun it into me, dumping coins. Banks framed himself as the victim, the misunderstood mastermind who just happened to get caught in someone else's chaos. But the tone of those messages told a different story, one of ego, deflection, and a refusal to take responsibility. Then, FaZe Banks' longtime friend and former roommate, spoke out. His words cut through the noise. "I saw what Banks said, but he still hasn't denied if those DMs are real. It's all about accountability." That single comment turned whispers into wildfire. Fans who once defended Banks now questioned everything. Was this the same man who once built FaZe on loyalty and brotherhood? Or was it just branding, another hustle in disguise? Banks tried to do damage control. He tweeted about mental health, burnout, and how his name was being farmed for clicks. He called the accusations unfair and insisted he'd never scammed anyone a day in his life. But the audience wasn't buying it anymore. The apology sounded too familiar, like a script he'd rehearsed every few years. Behind the scenes, things were unraveling. MLGcoin's developers released more screenshots, messages showing Banks threatening to walk away unless he got a bigger slice of the tokens. He bragged about making 6 figures a day, admitted it wasn't about money, but being right, and hinted at losing faith in his own team. It wasn't the language of a misunderstood leader. It was the mindset of someone watching his empire crack and trying to squeeze one last win out of the wreckage. When Aiden responded publicly, confirming the messages were real and saying, "I'm just hurt someone I call my brother went behind my back," it was over. The narrative Banks tried so hard to control was now out of his hands. But instead of coming clean, he doubled down. He promised a stream with Aiden to clear the air. He said the truth was miscommunicated and destroyed his mental. The announcement sounded less like redemption and more like desperation. Because at that point, the damage wasn't about crypto anymore. It was about trust. About the collapse of a persona that had once seemed untouchable. And when Banks finally went live to face the fallout, the performance that followed would prove one thing. He hadn't learned from his past. He'd mastered it. When Banks finally sat across from Aiden Ross on stream, the world expected a confession. What they got instead was a performance. Equal parts guilt, charm, and damage control. It wasn't about truth anymore. It was about survival. From the moment the cameras turned on, Banks played the part perfectly. He started with nostalgia. "We've known each other for years. We've lived together. We've been through everything." He reminded Aiden and everyone watching that their friendship was real. It was a classic move. Humanize the connection before addressing the crime. Because if the audience feels empathy, they hesitate to judge. Then came the pivot. Banks argued that the MLG crash wasn't his fault, that the community dumped when Aiden bought in, that he never sold any tokens, and that it didn't even make logical sense for him to rug his own investment. It was smooth, confident, and rehearsed. He spoke like a man wronged, not exposed. But for every word of denial, viewers saw the pattern. The sidestepping, the whatabouts, the emotional plays. He leaned on the same tactics that once made him untouchable. Charm, calm, and controlled chaos. And Aiden, trying to keep the peace, let him lead. The tension felt less like an apology and more like a negotiation between two people who both wanted the story to end without a villain. When chat demanded answers, Banks shifted tone again. Suddenly, he was vulnerable. He talked about his mental health, his stress, his exhaustion. He said he regretted every part of it. To his fans, it sounded sincere. To everyone else, it sounded like another rebrand of the same defense. "I messed up, but not really." And just when the conversation got uncomfortable, Banks made his final move, taking it off camera. "Let's just talk off stream. I love you, bro. I don't want the internet to see us like this." It was the perfect exit line. Soft, emotional, and strategically timed. A fade out instead of a fallout. By the end, Aiden gave him exactly what he wanted. Forgiveness. He told viewers about the contract everyone signed, saying they hadn't dumped any tokens, and that he was ready to move on. The tension lifted. Banks had escaped again, not with proof, but with persuasion. But the internet wasn't fooled. They'd seen this movie before. Every scandal, every misunderstanding, every tearful defense. It was all part of the same playbook. Banks didn't clear his name. He just outlasted the outrage. He didn't win the argument. He won the attention. And in the world Banks built, that's always been the real currency. But even attention runs out, and what came next would finally make the untouchable man disappear. After the stream, FaZe Banks went silent. For a man who'd built his career on being loud, visible, and always online, the quiet was deafening. No more podcasts, no more Twitter rants, no more high-energy posts about real culture and vision. Just a single announcement. He was stepping down as CEO of FaZe Clan. It sounded noble, almost poetic, the fallen founder taking accountability. But the timing said everything. His reputation was in shambles, his fan base divided, and the organization he once defined was now desperate to save face. The empire that started as a dream in a bedroom had become a corporate brand, too big to be carried by one man's ego. Banks tried to control the narrative one last time. In a string of tweets, he painted himself as a misunderstood creator. "I've never scammed anyone a day in my life. My name just gets farmed for clicks. But no amount of deflection could erase the trail of broken promises, crypto wreckage, and trust that had turned to dust." The irony was painful. The same man who once bragged about finessing Hollywood was now being outplayed by his own audience. Every post he made became a meme. Every defense turned into a punchline. The internet wasn't listening anymore. It was laughing. Even his old circle started to drift. FaZe Rain, once his closest ally, called him out publicly for dodging responsibility. Other members stayed quiet, careful not to get dragged down with him. The message was clear. FaZe had moved on. Banks hadn't. He'd built his world on hype, loyalty, and image. But those things don't age well in the light. When the deals fall apart and the followers stop believing, the empire built on charisma starts to look like what it always was: smoke and mirrors. In the end, Banks didn't get canceled. He just faded out, replaced by newer names, fresher faces, louder controversies. The algorithm moved on without him. And maybe that's the most poetic ending of all. Not a crash, but a quiet erasure. He wanted to be remembered as a pioneer, the guy who turned gaming into culture, and in a way, he will be. But beneath the legacy lies a warning. When you build a brand on manipulation, every lie becomes a countdown. Because in the digital age, nobody really falls from grace. They just scroll past it. And somewhere, offline and out of sight, Banks is probably planning his next comeback. After all, illusion was always his favorite game. FaZe Banks didn't just build an empire. He built a mirror. One that reflected the very thing the internet loves most: confidence, chaos, and the illusion of control. For years, he mastered the rhythm of attention. Scandal, apology, comeback, repeat, until the pattern became his identity. His story isn't just about scams or crypto or clout. It's about the ecosystem that rewards them. We love the rise so much that we forget to question the foundation. We idolize the bold ones, the ones who say, "Trust me," with a grin, until that trust becomes too expensive to keep. And when it finally breaks, we act shocked, even though the warning signs were always there, flashing like red lights we chose to ignore. Banks's fall wasn't a single event. It was a slow erosion of integrity, of loyalty, of self-awareness. Each controversy chipped away at the myth until there was nothing left to sell. Because the thing about running on hype is that it always demands more. More drama, more headlines, more risk, until the next stunt becomes the last one. And yet, there's something almost poetic in the aftermath. The same charisma that built FaZe, that sold millions on the dream, is the same force that destroyed it. It's the oldest story in entertainment, the showman who believed his own illusion. But this time, the audience saw through the smoke. The applause stopped. The curtain didn't close. It just tore down the middle. So maybe FaZe Banks wasn't the villain of this story, just its most honest reflection. The product of a system that values viral over virtuous, clicks over character. And maybe that's the real cautionary tale, because the internet will always crown a new king, but every kingdom built on hype eventually meets the same fate. The lights fade, the feed refreshes, and another name takes his place. And somewhere out there, Banks is watching, waiting for the moment the crowd forgets again.